Hello, Judith here from Therapies for the Mind. You may or may not have noticed, but I have been doing a series of videos about the symptoms of anxiety. The things that indicate that you are suffering from an illness that is called clinical anxiety. And I thought it might be useful to summarise those symptoms. And then you can find the appropriate video if you want to look into it in a bit more depth. Okay then. So the ones that most people will recognise as related to anxiety, they may call it worry or stress, are first and foremost, and this I think is the worst one, that anxiety at this level takes all of the joy out of life. There are few positive emotions: happiness, contentment, joy, looking forward to things. All of that is gone and you're left with the negative feelings, the fear, the constant apprehension, the negative thinking, the negative feeling. And this just makes life desolate. And I have people who sit in front of me and say, I'm just existing, I'm not living, I'm not enjoying anything. And if you're there, I hope you recognise that you are suffering from anxiety. The second one is one of the physical ones, which is experiencing a panic attack or an anxiety attack. Now, people don't always recognise these for what they are, to the extent that I've had clients who've taken themselves off to A&E more than once, believing they were having a heart attack. So the classic symptoms of a panic attack is your heart's going 19 to the dozen, you're breathing very, very fast. And then there are a whole range of other symptoms, which you'll have some of them. You've got sweaty palms, or you feel generally sweaty. You may feel nauseous. But the primary symptom is what's going on in your chest, that ability, that difficulty in getting your breath, and that feeling that your heart is about to explode. So, as I say, if you don't think of it as something physical, then you will learn, possibly by Googling, that this is what an anxiety attack feels like. And it is scary. The third one is, and I mentioned it briefly before when talking about negative emotions, you're in a constant state of apprehension, worrying about what might happen next. And typically what goes with this is what we call catastrophization. So you're not just worrying about what might go wrong, but you're worrying about the full implications of that to the worst possible case. So, people can go within seconds from making a mistake at work to losing their job, to their marriage breaking down, losing their home and being on the streets. Literally, I've watched people do it. And not quite that one, but I have experienced it myself. It's very easy to get into if you are feeling in a state of anxiety or overwhelm, to actually just go immediately to the worst thing that can happen. I talked recently about how bad anxiety can get, and it can get to the point where your life is pretty much ruined because you are so scared of anything going wrong. You're so scared of absolutely anything and everything that you can't leave the house. Or you can maybe leave the house to get to work and do the sort of regular things, but you can't do anything else. So again, you can exist, you can survive, but not much else. The next two may or may not be recognised as symptoms of anxiety. And they can both, of course, have other causes. So people often report either physical pains in the chest, and it's described differently, but, you know, it's something going on in the chest. And that may include palpitations and difficulty breathing. So the sort of early stages of a panic attack, which doesn't develop. Or people may describe digestive problems, because anxiety does have an effect on your digestion. And a lot of people I see have been diagnosed with IBS. So they may have nausea, or actually be physically sick. So these, of course, are physical things that need to be checked out because they could have a physical cause, but they're also very common symptoms of anxiety. And the last one, which may or may not be recognised as a symptom of anxiety, is poor sleep. So people may see sleep as their major problem and not realise that it's caused by anxiety. And that may be true in some circumstances, but typically with anxiety comes poor sleep. We're constantly worrying, and we're constantly feeling all of those negative feelings, and overthinking goes very much with anxiety. So this whirring of the brain all of the time, thinking of all the things we're worrying about. And that means it's very, very difficult to get to sleep. It can be very difficult to stay asleep. And even if you do sleep, the sleep is not a good quality. So again, there can be other causes for poor sleep that need to be checked out, but it is a very common symptom of anxiety. The last three that I'm going to talk about, people rarely see as anything to do with being anxious. So they may not, if these are their primary symptoms, they may not realise that it's anxiety that is the cause. Poor concentration, difficulty focusing and actually getting anything done, particularly anything that involves thinking. There's far too much going on in your head for any other kind of thinking. And poor memory. And people can fear early onset, or depending on age, later onset, Alzheimer's or dementia of some kind, because if things get really bad and they can't concentrate on anything, they can't focus, they can't remember even the simplest things, they begin to worry that there's something else going on. And again, those things need to be checked out. But because of all the rest of the worrying and the thinking that's going on with anxiety, concentration, focus, memory can be affected. An even more unlikely one for most people is being unable to relax, very restless. So physically on the go all of the time, the sort of person who sits down and then, a few seconds later jumps up and says, oh, I must just go and do something. Who can't sit in front of the television, who is unable to have any downtime, unable to relax. And often the feelings that go with this are a feeling of sort of being on edge. It's not sort of obvious worrying, but you're just sort of, can't sit, a bit twitchy, a bit restless, up and down. And that is not, obviously, if that's your primary symptom, it may be that you believe this is just the way you are. Maybe you've forgotten that once upon a time in your life, you were able to relax. And it's an important symptom, because if we don't have any downtime, if we don't relax, if we don't stop and rest, then we're going to burn out. And the last one is being irritable, being easily annoyed. And you may not be terribly aware of this until somebody says to you, You always used to be quite calm and take things in your stride, but now the slightest thing gets you going. You know, you're snappy with the kids, you get cross with your partner, and you may even have a real anger problem. This can develop into a real anger problem. And again, people come to me with, you know, I've got an anger problem. And in fact, they haven't got an anger problem. They've got an anxiety problem, which is causing anger. So the irritability and the, you know, easily annoyed can turn into full-blown anger. So if any of these has struck a chord with you, and certainly if more than one of them has, then maybe you ought to think a little bit about what's going on. And maybe what's required is physical checks, but maybe actually you're not physically ill, you're mentally ill, suffering with clinical anxiety, and you do need to get help. And unfortunately, in most cases, if you don't do anything about it, it tends to get worse. Rarely just goes away on its own. So think very carefully and take some action. All my details will be at the end of this video, and take a look at my website if what's on offer sounds like it might be helpful. If you think you'd be comfortable working with me, then please get in touch. But if I and what I do aren't right for you, find something that is, please, and soon. Okay, as always, take care, stay safe, stay well. Bye.